Unlocking the power of hydration for healthy kidneys in diabetes. So we're talking about kidney health, hydration, and diabetes today. But before we get started, I'm wondering how many of you guys out there are Ed Sheeran fans, if at all. Are there any Ed Sheeran fans in the house? And this is going somewhere, trust me. Okay. Doesn't look like anybody is a fan of Ed Sheeran, or they're not like admitting it. But anyway, so I'm in Vegas, right? And Ed Sheeran was in town on September 9, which was this past Saturday, for a big concert. And we'd known about this concert for months, right? And there were about 65,000 people that were supposed to attend. And I was one of them. And so were my friends. So me and my friends were there. And we all happened to be from here. Incidentally, my friends had not been to Allegiant Stadium where this event was taking place. And so we got there early, a little bit early. Doors were supposed to open at 4. And as you know, these days you can't take anything in with you. So we had some water, we drank it down real quick as we were about to go in. We were there a little bit, like a few minutes early. And it was hot. The weather was about 100 and something degrees. We were standing in the shade. But come 4 o'clock, the doors weren't opening. And 15 after 4, the doors weren't opening. And then it was like, well, is this the right time? Like, what time were the doors supposed to open? And then checked the app again, and all of a sudden it said 4:30, which then I was confused because I thought the doors were supposed to open at 4. But now it's 4:30 and still the doors aren't opening. But now it says it's opening at 4:30. About 15 minutes later, now it's 4:45, doors still aren't opening. It's hot. There's more and more people coming, right? Remember, this thing has 65,000 people. And so I'd already drunk my water, so did my friends, because we thought we were just going to be going in. I was starting to get worried because I was starting to feel really thirsty and a little bit dizzy, starting to get a headache. And we're about 45 minutes into this. And there's more and more people coming. You're already feeling like it's hot and there's more people coming. It's just getting hotter and everybody wants to be in the shade, but everybody can't be in the shade. An hour later, still nothing, but suddenly there's an update. But the update isn't that the doors are going to be opening. It's just that something is going on and they're not sure what's going on, but we're going to get an update at 5:30. An hour and a half later, the doors finally open. And so we go in. So this is a preface to what we're talking about because heat-related illness can cause problems. Me and my friends were relatively healthy, but I was already, by this time, I was feeling slightly dizzy. I was doing my best not to faint, and I'm also a little bit claustrophobic, which is not a good combination, and everybody was just there. So I was feeling like I couldn't breathe. I was trying not to faint, and then somebody was like, well, if somebody has a medical emergency, are you going to help? Because we're all like medical people. I was like, well, I'm almost a medical emergency here myself, so unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to. And there was water somewhere, which I don't know where, but you had to go out into the sun somewhere to go get it and walk maybe, 50 feet. Signs of heat exhaustion. So headache, dizziness, or lightheadedness, feeling thirsty, feeling irritable. So those were all symptoms that me and my friends were having. We're relatively healthy. So you can think about people who are on certain medications. There's medications that can cause dehydration, some medications for blood pressure, and then some illnesses where, for example, diabetes, which we're going to talk about. Diabetes is associated with dehydration. So somebody with diabetes who was standing out there, hopefully they had some water. If not, it could lead to some problems. One of them is heat-related illness, which is the symptoms that I just talked to you about, but understand that they're exacerbated in people with conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, people who are elderly, 65 and over, causes more problems too. And we were out there for about an hour and a half before we got in. And that's not the end of the story. We'll get to the story at the end of this. And I don't know if it was on national news since I don't watch it, but what happened was definitely on the news here. And you can't really believe everything that you hear on the news because I was there firsthand and some stuff that was said was not exactly true. So diabetes and dehydration. Thinking about diabetes, so diabetes occurs because there's a problem with insulin. So insulin's there, it's not being used correctly. That's type 2. In type 1, there's like no insulin and they need to be on insulin. But we're talking about type 2. High blood sugars lead to thirst because if there's too much sugar in the blood, then the blood is a little bit more concentrated than it needs to be. And the body is trying to get it less concentrated. And that's why there's thirst. So you can be more thirsty if your blood sugar is too high. And that's actually one of the symptoms of diagnosing, one of the first symptoms of diabetes in people who are just getting diagnosed. They're thirsty all the time. And that's because they have these high blood sugars and they don't know that they have diabetes. So that's one thing. So then what happens with that? So now, since the blood sugar is too high and that's circulating around, the kidneys are working really hard, extra hard actually, to clear out all the extra glucose, get rid of it, kind of filter it out. And so there's more urination, increased urination. That's also a sign of high blood sugar in a newly diagnosed diabetic, or it's a sign of hyperglycemia in somebody who already has diabetes but has uncontrolled or really high blood sugars at a certain point in time. So increased urination and increased thirst. And then if that goes on for a really long time, the uncontrolled high blood sugars, and that can lead to some longer term kidney problems, but that's in the long term. And even in the short term, so in this example of us being left out in the sun, heat-related illness too can lead to acute kidney injuries. You're dehydrated, and so now your kidney doesn't have enough fluid. And so there's a little bit of worsening of kidney function, but that's temporary if you can get fluids like water or some other fluid to drink to get you hydrated. And so then the question is, as a diabetic, how much water should you be drinking? And it's pretty much the same as everybody else. 6 to 8 glasses of water a day is recommended at a minimum. 6 at least for women, 8 at least for men. That it roughly turns out to be 1.5 liters to about 2 liters. And then just stress alone can lead to high blood sugars. So that was a really stressful situation, us out there in the sun for about 1.5 hours, not really knowing what's going on. So somebody with diabetes, think about the stress. Blood sugars could just be going up from that. And then just from being ill, that can raise blood sugars too. So if they were starting to have heat-related illness, like most of us were, that caused problems too. And there were people being wheeled around in wheelchairs after the fact. And so there were some medical things that happened, but it was not good. So another thing that can happen with really high blood sugars acutely, and it's usually in type 1 diabetics, but in this situation, I wouldn't be surprised if there was somebody that this happened to, because we were out there for a long time. So high blood sugar circulating around, and then the body isn't really able to get rid of it anymore. And so it starts instead using fat for fuel. Like it's not able to just even use the glucose anymore, just because it's been so high and it's just really dysfunctional. And then that's when you have diabetic ketoacidosis. And some of the symptoms of that are some of the symptoms of heat-related illness too. Increased thirst, but then you get things like confusion, and a heat stroke can also cause confusion and even a coma. The thing that you want to do is get out of the heat, get into cooler weather or a cooler place, or get into the shade as soon as you can. Put cold compresses on yourself or the person that's having the issue, and then try and hydrate. If you get into the heat stroke, where there's confusion, loss of consciousness, that's a 911 medical emergency, because that could lead to badness, and that needed to be taken care of right away. So are you guys interested in what happened at the end of the story? All right, so an hour and a half later, we got in, and we didn't just get in. Now there's like 65,000 people. So the line was way backed up. And so you got in, but then you couldn't move. So there was a crowd inside there. And I was like, okay, like what's going on? Like the escalators aren't going up or whatever. So that's blocked off. So we kind of like squeezed our way through and made our way around and kind of got out of that because there was just more and more people coming in and it wasn't moving. So that was kind of crazy. Well, it turns out that the concert was canceled and there was no communication, even though on the news they said there was communication. Like, we're in Allegiant Stadium, they've got loudspeakers everywhere, but there was no overhead communication about this. It was word of mouth. So I guess Ed Sheeran on Instagram said that something happened, and so the concert was canceled. And so that's how you heard that the concert was canceled, was word of mouth. So it was kind of crazy. I'm not exactly sure why they couldn't let us in, at least while we were waiting, instead of waiting outside for like an hour and a half, sometimes like 2 hours for people, depending on how long they were there. Because when we got in, I saw like there were people, like the little like emergency first aid people, they were around with people on wheelchairs. So people got sick. That is a short and simple overview of hydration and how it's related to diabetes, but just other conditions too, and our kidneys. And remember to stay hydrated.